Hello and welcome back to an episode of Do Something. This is Naresh, and I have the great fortune of having a very, very special guest with me today. He is a legend in the some of the business activities that I participate in. He is wildly successful in these particular spaces we're going to talk about today, and we have again the good fortune of hearing some of his story and looking forward to some of the nuggets that we're going to get out of this. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Pejman Ghadimi, also known as PJ. PJ, welcome.
What's up, buddy?
How you doing, man? Thank you for your time. I know you're an extremely busy guy, and I really appreciate the time you're going to help with us today. It means a lot to the folks that are listening, and to me to be able to learn from you and also share that knowledge for the wider community as well. So, PJ, why don't you? I know a lot about you personally, at least a lot about you that has been published. You are somebody. I'll say you're somebody that I first discovered on the Netflix special in the Fastest Car Spot, and I saw you then a couple of years ago, and I'm like, who is this guy? He's not for everybody, and I really like him. Like, that attitude is something that I am totally attracted to, and I get it, and I can see how other people just don't get it, and that's probably why I was even more attracted to what you're about then. And so I did some research. I found you, and ever since I found you, in that sense, I've been a huge fan in following your work and your teaching and being a part of the community that you've created as well. So, PJ, why don't you talk about your background, your history, where you came from, and let's get into some of the fun stuff that we do today.
It's funny that you mentioned Netflix, because that's basically what I'm known as, like, the world's biggest asshole for.
All right.
So definitely not for everybody, but I've always lived my life in a way where it's always like, you tell things the way they are, then you don't need to make up a different way to tell them, right? So
Right.
if you're authentic and true to who you are or who you choose to be, then you don't have to reinvent yourself every single day, depending on who you're talking to. You just attract those who believe in the same things you do. So I've always been big in trying to stay as authentic as I can, despite how much it hurts or makes people uncomfortable. So that's, I kind of warn people often bore I start talking that if you say something and I think it's bullshit, I'm going to call you out on it.
Right.
And if you say something that I think is valuable, I'm going to ask you questions about it, and we're going to discuss it. But a lot of people, for that reason, stay very far away from me, because they know that just approaching me and having conversations are probably not going to end up in their favor, especially when they're not really experts in their fields or in their topic. And I'm within 3 questions, I'm basically going to expose that, and they're going to be very uncomfortable. So that's usually why I'm an acquired taste, not for everybody. So
I'd say the world needs more straight shooters, people who embrace candor, because too many people are not hearing the truth. And they're led to believe in these mediocre principles.
Well, truth is subjective to perspective, right? Because there are legitimately some people whose truth is so distorted, and yet their speech is very relevant to their truth, right?
Right.
So that's a dangerous thing to say, because if we straight shooters are important. People who say things in the way they mean them. I think that matters, right? But I think the issue is we as a society take straight shooters very much literally for what they're saying, not taking in consideration the context of why they're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had a really big reality check on this when I visited Wisconsin. I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., in L.A., and then in Florida now. And, visiting, these are basically very, very strong states that have strong economies, jobs, and, there's an educated population, there's access to high-end jobs, and, so it's usually a high income net worth type area. So very different experience than living in Arkansas or in Wisconsin or some of these places where you don't have that.
Yep.
And often I used to, this was 10 plus years ago, I used to always believe that why can't people find jobs? Why are people lazy? This doesn't make any sense, right? And I used to live by these principles all the time until I visited some of these places and spent time there, only to realize that, people don't know what they haven't seen, right? So someone who lives in that, Wisconsin place just basically looks at the world like this is the world.
Right.
And someone who lives in Miami looks at it, this is the world.
Right.
You might ask someone in Arkansas why they married some ugly ass chick, and they might be like, well, it's just the hottest chick here. Like she's beautiful. And I'm like, bro, you haven't seen beauty. Like, come to Florida for 10 minutes. Like you're going to have a heart attack. You're basically going to go home, pack your shit and move to Miami or LA. Like what I'm saying is like, what you don't know, right, is only like based on that perspective. What's actually funny is most people don't realize that another world exists outside of their own. So it takes a lot of awareness for me to step into Arkansas or Wisconsin and be like, how is this different? Why is this? Why are these people not getting this, right? Or why do they feel a certain way? And it's also very difficult for those people to remove themselves from their environment, travel somewhere and be like, what have I not seen? What is it that I don't understand of this other view? I think that's part of the reason why economies and political gains get so divided over time, is because we tend to not pay attention to the structure or the reality of others, and we expect them to come to our reality instead of us going to theirs. And so both parties want to stay in their own place, right? And as a result tend to not understand the driving force of why someone's decisions are such or not. But don't want to steal from the interview saying that, but I just want to say that a lot of people that talk about looking at a reality don't realize that a reality in itself needs to be expanded by they themselves exposing themselves to things that they're uncomfortable being exposed to.
Right.
You could say this about a detective that sees crime a very different way. When he sees people butchered in like 5 places, the news don't show you that. They just say there's a murder, right?
Right.
There's a very different reality to watching someone cut up in 6 pieces in front of you, right? Versus watching it on TV saying a murder occurred in this warehouse, and that's it. That's the context, right?
Yep.
So there's a different cause that arises from that, and I think that's what shapes people's reality. And as individuals, we often fail to understand what those realities are, regardless that we accept them or not. We don't have to always accept someone's poverty as a good reason, but we can also understand what struggles truly lie in front of them that prevent them from being able to assess life the same way we do as an individual,
Yep.
So my personal background is actually not in psychology, which is that actually came later, personally as more of a passion thing. But
and I do want to talk about that because you've dropped so many nuggets already, and as I was reading your book, your most recent, The Gate of Choice, I gotta admit, and we're gonna talk about your background because I want to know where this came from. Don't take it the wrong way. I was impressed. I was completely
No, I know.
impressed.
It's completely different from what people expect, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And I've gotten that a lot, which is fine. Like that's part of my own MO of working. You see, like I believe every human has two types of identities, right? And so the way a human being evolves is basically going to a stage of awareness, self-awareness, consciousness. Not everybody does, but these are the 3 basic core principles of human evolution.
Right.
In the self-awareness stage, something very critical happens. And it's when man basically realizes that he has 2 identities. 1, his societal identity, 2, his cosmic identity. So these identities are very different, and one is very necessary to get to the other. So you first have to fit into society and understand what your role is here and adhere to it and be able to work through it before you can choose what your cosmic identity is, and then kind of move towards your own state of consciousness from that. Now, the bridge from self-awareness to consciousness is creativity. So that is the ultimate way or tool man uses to basically bridge that gap between those 2 identities and kind of carry forward. That's why entrepreneurship often is something that is often misunderstood as it's a business. It's about building businesses and making money.
Right.
Entrepreneurship simply stands for unity around creation. So the point is to unite others around your cosmic purpose, right? That's the goal of like that's where the creativity comes in. The entrepreneurial creativity of creating from like basically building something from nothing, and creating a new control mechanism for others. So that's kind of like how the human mind evolves. My background in my societal identity has always been finance and money. I was the youngest bank manager in the US, in a very early stage, and then kind of evolved past that and continued my finance kind of background.
Right.
Even my first businesses were all focused around, investment funds, around alternative assets. So again, everything around money, how do you turn money into more money and so on and so forth. A lot of leadership there and things like that. But mainly the goal was I was a money guy, I was a finance guy.
Yeah.
And that was my accepted societal identity.
So,
and then I evolved to choosing teaching as my cosmic identity, which is where that bridge happened. And the creation of the tools to do that are things such as these platforms I've created, these books I've written, which are mediums of teaching, right? Like they're mediums of transferring information to people.
Yep.
But the idea is that the majority of people know me for my societal identity, for cars, watches,
right,
like money and these aspects, which are the things I talk about a lot, which are important because in its way, I am helping people bridge that gap for themselves of defining their own social identity, right? And their social identity cannot be identified without having money. Now, this is a part where a lot of people will not understand the greater plan. They only look at this from one piece of it, like, oh, they're just teaching watches, teaching cars, doing this. But the reality is, I teach people how to master the art of money. Because what's going to end up happening for them is without money, they're always going to be in a state of survival or poverty. Without money, they're not going to have the time to cultivate their societal identity. So as a result of that, they need to learn to make money because the systems don't get changed or tilted by people who complain about them or don't think they're built on equality or justice. They get tilted when money with a different intent comes into a room and changes the intent of the room. So basically, like the same 20 people that run the world, that are basically pulling the strings on everything. The only way you can be changing how the world turns or which direction turns in is if you enter the room with the same leverage and you tell yourself, how can I bring my intent or my worldview to this stage?
Right.
And as a result of that, how does that shift? How does that make a dent in the system?
Yeah.
Versus people always talking about injustice or talking about things unfair. And listen, the system was never built on equality. The illusion of equality and justice was what allowed you to not go and start a shootout somewhere because, it's basically the control mechanism is the intent or the thought that it is equal, not the reality that it truly is equal. I mean, you can just look at the crime conviction rate of every Black dude, versus every white dude. Like same crime, the guy's in prison like 7 times more than the other guy.
The data speaks for itself.
Right, and they're like, he just had a bad judge, and no, he didn't. It would have been like, well, who was the judge? Some white guy. Again, same thing, right? But there is a guy out there who complains about that, who goes, we expect better. And the problem is they expect the system to fix itself instead of saying, I'm going to make enough money. And I'm going to tilt the system, but by working the system and being in it and changing that.
And so you embrace something that I try to live as well is, complaining about the system doesn't change anything for you. It just paints a picture of you, but using the system to your advantage, right? There is a system. Let's accept there's a system.
Oh, there is 100%. It's like the matrix is real, right? Like it's there.
It's there. Yeah. Exactly. You can try to change it on one hand and maybe that's not a bad thing, but you can equally use it to your benefit for the results that you want as well. And you've leveraged that in your own authentic way. That is just,
I don't think you have to use it. This is the part where I guess maybe people, definitions matter. In my last book, I talk a lot about the dictionary for higher humans, right? Because definitions, we as a society always generalize things. Like we talk about things like, for example, we say entrepreneurship. So that's self-employment, that's business, that's success, that's everything, right? Like, and it's like, you're an entrepreneur, so that's like the word. But like I said, not a guy that opens a pizza shop is not a fucking entrepreneur, just a fucking pizza shop owner. He's a business owner. He owns a food place. Like that's it. There's nothing fucking innovative about owning a pizza shop. Like you didn't invent the pizza, you didn't invent the way it's delivered. Like nothing changes, right? And while your marketing can be innovative or the way you succeed can be innovative, that still doesn't make you an entrepreneur. Like so, again, these are the things that using these definitions separately allows us to actually work towards becoming a real entrepreneur, meaning allows us to transition from a business owner to an entrepreneur. But if we already believe we are what we're not, then how are we ever going to progress, right? Because we're not. And so I think definitions matter a lot. And so when we talk about the system or the matrix, I think one of the mistakes we make is, talking about using the system in our favor versus their favor. Or I think that the point of anything is to master the actual game itself. So in that mastery exists a level of self-knowledge and a level of self-gain and self-benefit that comes from it, right? Like, I mean, the system's created. Someone like Amazon says, hey, I've paid zero income tax, whatever. But I've done it legally. I didn't say I don't want to pay.
Right.
Like, it's the same as it's a bigger issue when a random person says, I just won't pay taxes, even though I owe $100, than it is for Amazon to say, hey, here is the process that the system exists in. Here's what we're allowed to do. We're allowed to write off these 50,000 trucks. We're allowed to buy this plane and write it off as this. And I'm allowed to write off this particular warehouse as my house, whatever that is. And that's the way the rules are set.
Yep.
Now, these are the rules. Now meaning the rules were not set by the person working in them. However, the person working in them used them to their advantage as well.
Right.
The mastery of that system allows yourself to get to a state where you can shift that system. Because the mastery of the system means that Amazon now has more money than the government, which means that theoretically, if it wanted to impact that decision-making, it could, right? Meaning it could shift that scale, right? And it could rewrite even tax laws because it's mastered them. And so one of the issues that people don't realize is it's not about just using the system, because then you're still a prisoner of the system within it.
Right.
It's about mastery of evolution past the system. So you have to be able to master the system enough to raise yourself above it in order to impact this change to then benefit either yourself because you're very selfish, or benefit in the direction of change that you'd like to create.
Yep. And that's I know you talk about being a prisoner of the system in the Gate of Choice, which was, it's I started to read this, just the first couple of pages, and there's so much in there. You almost have to read it a few times to really capture all of this.
You have to basically read it one time to just understand the concept.
Right.
Then you have to go back and basically understand where you fit in the book.
Right.
And every year you have to revisit it to basically understand if your evolution has led you past stages. Now, I've written 3 books that are correlated, which is Third Circle Theory on awareness, Radius on the creativity of self-awareness, and then Gate of Choice on the birth of consciousness, right? And all 3 books will mean something very different to different people, meaning someone will read Gate of Choice at a very high stage of consciousness and be like, yeah, I've already connected most of these dots here, something new that I hadn't looked at.
Yep.
Awesome. Like, this is amazing. Great. Someone else that reads it, that's a very early stage awareness person, will be like, what kind of bullshit and mumbo jumbo is this?
Yep.
Like, this doesn't fit into my life, right? Like this is contradictory to anything I've ever been taught or believe. And I can't fathom this information. Like, this isn't something I can accept, right? So therefore, this is trash and I don't like it. And that's a very fair place to be in life, because everyone has a beginning at some point, right? Sure. And while someone's evolution is based upon their opportunity to use their senses, and that person obviously is not, that's why they feel that way. It is a reality we face at some point or another. We have to face the reality that everything we know, as much as we believe it to be a reality and true, can equally be false. And if we don't believe that, then we can't accept new information in the system. We just can't.
Yep.
And the problem is then we really turn ourselves into real prisoners. That's when we really drink the Kool-Aid and go like, this Kool-Aid tastes good. I'm good with it. And I don't want to change it. Like, I don't want to see if I could have even better Kool-Aid next time, because this is pretty good. And I'm happy with this. Right. Yep. And so we basically, as humans, have given ourselves this big scam. Like, I'm writing an article on the world's biggest scam, which is this idea that happiness is ultimately man's goal in life. And this has become the biggest scam that humanity has basically accepted over the last, whatever long we've existed past the dinosaurs.
Right.
The point is that happiness was never and should never be the goal of life, because that in itself is contradictory to the purpose of human existence. The purpose of human existence is progress and evolution. And one of the happiness is contradictory to that, because happiness breeds comfort
and content.
And so, it breeds comfort.
Yeah.
And what happens is, if you're happy, you're comfortable.
Yep.
That state of happiness puts you in a state of basically no longer moving. You're like, I'm really happy, right?
So, right here. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so that it becomes contradictory to the idea of evolution. So what the problem it creates is that happiness becomes the basic prison that you stick yourself in. And it's the food that you're fed, in that prison cell, to be like, oh, I'm happy. I like this food. I'm good. Like, why would I want it elsewhere? Right. And one of the things I think that happiness in itself is not a negative thing, but when happiness is linked to a state of mind rather than a state of progress, it becomes very dangerous because it breeds comfort. When happiness is linked to a state of progress, then the body and the mind and the spirit moves forward all the time. And the joy comes from the ability to be in the next point, in the next place, not coming from having acquired something, which is why when people are happy for having a new car, that wears off quite fast, right? When people are happy for having a new marriage, even that wears off. I mean, there's tons of people who meet people, they love them, they're excited, they love fucking, and then 6 months later, 6 years later, like, what the fuck did I do? Like, why did I get married, right?
Absolutely.
Because what happens is the marriage becomes the happy sector, right? And the marriage in itself doesn't evolve anymore. Like the human doesn't evolve. So two people are stuck in a cage, and eventually one of them realizes that's a cage, and he goes, I don't want to be here anymore. Like this isn't like this cage isn't where I want to be.
Right.
And then they just don't know how to get out because the cage doesn't have a door anymore. Yeah.
So those are pretty wild concepts. I mean, it's wild in a sense, and I say that because as I'm reading this book, and first of all, you embody all of these things. So it's really, and I know that now as I'm hearing this from you, and I'm reading your books, and I'm getting this, you're already living that life, and you've demonstrated this firsthand.
I only teach what I have experienced. Meaning I did not teach consciousness until I became conscious. I did not teach awareness until I was aware. I did not teach entrepreneurship until I understood and actually could call myself an entrepreneur. So again, all of these things are just journals of my life. A lot of people look at them and they're like, these are strategies, or did you read a book about it? And I'm like, I've never read a book in my life. I never have. And I've never even listened. I've never listened to an Audible in my life.
Okay.
So I don't care about reading because I think I would be smarter if I read, but my choice of how or what I want my life to be is not to gain a higher level of intelligence. It is always to gain a higher level of awareness. And awareness, we already have the tools inside us to gain that awareness. We have eyes, we have nose, we have mouth, we have ears. We listen to people's experiences. We can watch their behavior, right? We can smell the things we want to smell, and we can eat and taste the things we want to taste. Now, the question becomes, how in control of these experiences are we? Do we use these experiences with intent each and every day? What does that mean? Like, each meal I eat is a meal I want to eat.
Right.
It is not a meal that I am fed because I'm hungry.
Right.
It is something I want to taste. Each person next to me smells a certain way. They have to smell the way I want them to smell, or they can't be next to me.
Right.
I won't watch movies that I don't want to explore with my eyes, and I won't listen to music that doesn't put me in the zone. Get it? So if all of these behaviors are always elevating your awareness, then your intelligence is growing by the consumption of information that you seek to obtain.
Agreed.
And so the difference becomes, I seek awareness, and so I gain more of it. I seek more consciousness, so I pay attention more, and I seek more creativity, so I create more. And so the way we as humans can basically hack our own lives is to do this one thing that 99% of people don't do. You ready for this? It's really complex. Pay attention. Pay attention. That's it. That's it. Pay attention. That's the trick to life. That's the most incredible piece of advice I can give you, is pay attention to what the fuck's going on around you.
So I equate that to awareness, right? And being aware. But again, I'm going to choose my words wisely. Would you agree with that statement, or is that a different context?
So that in itself is a generalization, right? Awareness, yes. I think it's more about being self-aware. And I think that's the difference that most people lack. So today, in the state we live in, the way we live in, information is available. It's always been, meaning like social media, the capacity to see more. Like, what does social media do? It allows you to have eyes in places you wouldn't previously see, right? You can see on someone's boat, you can see in someone's work,
Yep.
You can use these. It's just an extension of your eyes.
Yes.
People use it to cloud your eyes and only show you what they want you to see.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
So I do the same thing. I show on social media. It's actually funny. 99% of my social is only used as advertisement.
Right.
And if you ever follow me on social, everything is done with intent. There's almost zero access into my personal private life.
Yes.
Because I just don't people recently, I was like, hey, I'm engaged. They were like, what? I didn't even know you had a girlfriend. One guy was like, I thought you were gay. I was like, what? I was like, why would you assume that? He's like, because you don't post chicks. And I was like, well, I just don't want you to know. Like,
it's a fair assessment based
right,
on
yeah. And then someone else was like, holy shit, your fiance is beautiful. And I was like, yeah. Well, they're like, oh, I thought you were hiding her. I was like, no, like I just don't post these things. I don't post my mom. I don't post my cousin. I just don't.
Yep.
Like there's a level that I show people what I want them to use for their own good, right? But the same can be used very negatively too, right? Someone could say like, I show you what I want to deceive you with so you can do this and not know what the truth is.
Yep.
I just show you partially part of my life, not all of my life, because I don't believe that all of your life should always be all over the world for others to just see and criticize, because you create a lot of that negative energy in your life.
Agreed.
For that, by doing that. But back to your point, the difference between awareness and self-awareness. So awareness is your ability to understand what's happening around you. Self-awareness is your ability to understand your existence within that environment and the impact that your existence holds in that environment. So in order to be self-aware, this is why most people aren't self-aware, is you have to have a very high level of self-honesty and alignment of reality to what people see of you. Like if you can't understand what you're portraying to others, if you don't understand how your intent, because if you go like, well, these people get me, but these people don't, right? It's because you're creating alternate realities that basically take you further away from the state of self-awareness.
Right.
So what happens is awareness is access to information and access to understanding what's happening. Self-awareness is understanding how this information is impacting you and others based on your presence within the realm of information that exists.
Yep.
So that's what people lack. They don't lack awareness, because awareness comes from access. And today everybody has a phone, right? We can all access things, but not everybody has this image of themselves when they're looking or staring in a mirror. And I think that
of themselves.
Well, the question is, who decides if you're fat? Who decides if you're good looking? Who decides if you're like, all of these things are basically like, they're based on your own reality.
Yes.
Right. If you're a guy and you're getting a lot of chicks, usually like, oh, I'm very good looking. Like that's your assumption based on the results you've seen.
Right.
But maybe you're not good looking. Maybe it's your charm. Maybe it's what you're saying. Right. And what I'm saying is, when you glorify yourself instead of fix yourself, you're going further and further away from that reality. Like just because you're good looking, because you're able to attain what you want, isn't necessarily a byproduct of being in the best version of yourself.
Agreed.
So one of the things I always tell people is, instead of focusing so much on what others are saying of me, which is counterintuitive of being more self-aware and self-honest, because then we can surround ourselves with people who kiss our ass instead of people who disagree with us, right? Then it feeds our ego more and more instead of helping us be better.
Yep.
So what I always tell people is, look at yourself in what is the perfect version of what you are, right? And then compare yourself to that. If you think you're a great runner, don't compare yourself to your high school.
Right.
Compare yourself to the person that everyone else has agreed holds the record for running the fastest.
Right. Right.
You look at Usain Bolt, you go, he can run a mile in 3 minutes, whatever the fuck it is. I don't know how fast the guy runs. So what I'm saying is, if he's doing that, right, and you consider yourself fast, then that means you're just as fast. That guy's fast. So your measure should be that.
Yeah.
And often the problem is, we compare ourselves to our limited peer groups.
Yes.
We go, I'm rich because I'm rich in Ohio, and you're like, fucking nobody's got money in Ohio. Who gives a shit? Like, there's the Amish, and then there's the other guy who's got a Mercedes. Well, the Mercedes guy is like super rich, right?
That's
the other guy has, right. The other guy has a horse, and it's like, well, doesn't mean you're rich. Just means you're richer than your neighbor.
Right.
So, but what happens is, your ego tends to make you feel good about that. Yeah. So it gives you a fake sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And then it prevents you from progressing. You go, I am rich. Why would I need a Ferrari? Nobody has a Ferrari.
Right.
Right. Until a guy moves in town with a Ferrari. Then you go, fuck, I'm poor. Like I need to get richer.
Yep.
But then you're always at the byproduct of your environment, right? You're always reactive to what's happening. So like, do I compete? Instead, what if you competed with yourself every day?
Yep.
And was like, could I do more? Could I work more? Could I create more? Could I produce more? Could I be part of something in a better manner? All of these things are things you can do now.
Yep.
By just looking at your existing life and choosing to live a life of progress and evolution, not choosing to live a life of comfort.
So PJ, I'm interested, as we're talking about this, you're going into, by the way, I'm taking notes like I don't normally do. This is some really powerful stuff. So thank you for sharing this. But on the topic that you're talking about right now with self-awareness and comparing, what do you compare to? Let's talk about mentorship for a second. I'm curious to hear your thoughts around mentorship, because on one hand, your eyes and developing your eyes for seeing, things as they are true, is one thing, but then there's the power of a mentor that's intended to help with that as well. Is that something that you subscribe to, or I know you do mentoring in a lot of ways in your businesses today. Is that something that you feel that you've leveraged personally, and that's transformed you?
Yes and no. I think again, this is where definitions matter.
Okay.
The word mentorship in itself is misunderstood by many, right? Like they confuse the idea of a mentor and a coach. I think those are two different things.
Yeah.
You can coach someone in the direction of a trade, right? A coach can train you on how to be a better football player.
Yep.
Even a coach can train you on how to be a better watch trader or car trader, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
There is a systematic process to how something works, and a coach can work you through it, right? And get you to basically learn how to use this process, leverage it, and become better at it. I think mentorship as a whole has taken this very negative ideology that every single person out there must have someone tell them what to do in order to find success. Like you're looking for a guide.
Yeah.
When in reality, one of the things you want to be doing more than anything else is to look for mentorship all around you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, like, when I was in banking and I didn't know how to be a banker, right?
Yep.
I didn't go to someone and said, teach me what you know, show me how to do this.
Right.
I just observed them, back to the experience, right? I just used my eyes to observe that person. And I said, what am I noticing in their behaviors that makes them successful? So that was the key to my mentorship experience. It wasn't to ask people, what do they do? How do they do it? What should I do? What are my steps? Like what should I do next? It was rather paying attention and mimicking the behaviors until I could adopt my own, until I had mastered their level. And I said, well, this doesn't work for my personality. Here are things I can do to change this. But the outcome then was better because it was authentic to mine. When we follow mentors, in general, like I get hit up 600 times on Instagram. How do I become successful?
Yep.
What do you do that I do? And I usually don't. I either delete those people, block them, or tell them to fuck off. And the reason I do that is because if you're seeking, like you're asking someone you don't know anything about, you don't pay attention to, you're not looking at anything. You're just basically saying, you have something I want.
Right.
And I want to steal it from you. That's what you're saying when you say that.
Yep.
You're saying, I want to steal that from you. Because what you're stealing from me is my time then. You're like, I need you to answer how I improve my life.
Yes.
And that's why I'm asking you this question. When I've given you books to read, I've put my thoughts on paper, right? I've said, here's books you can read. Here's books you can listen to. Here's a course on how to do this.
Right.
And you've said, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is what's in it for me now.
Right.
And I don't want to give you anything to take from me. I just want to steal from you.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually block these people because I'm like, they're thieves.
Yep.
And they just don't realize it. Their intent is completely corrupt to begin with. So one of the things they don't like, again, like people buy things because they believe it will change them. They don't want to change themselves. Get it? Like they buy things because they believe it will change them. And that's the problem.
Yes.
Like you could say, like, look, you're in my watch trading course, and you go, look, I loved watches. I wanted to learn the process. I saw you were teaching the process of watch trading. I learned that stage.
Right.
I did not expect to make $10 million, $5 million, $200. I expected to learn this process.
Correct.
The byproduct of what I do with this process is what determines how much money I make in this process.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is the majority of people don't want to hear that. They want to be told, if I do this, how much do I make now?
They want the formula for it. Just go straight to it.
Right. But the part, they want the solution to the equation. They don't want to learn the equation.
Right.
They want to be told what the equation is. They don't want to adapt the algebra or the calculus to what the equation, how does it shift if you move this number?
Yep.
They're more interested in 2 + 2 = 4. That's what you're telling me.
Right.
That I can accept.
Yep.
But if you're telling me to learn what happens when you add a 3 instead of a 2, that's a lot of work, man. I think this is a scam now. Like, this isn't working for me because now it's forcing me to change my behavior.
Right.
And that's taking me out of comfort, right? Anything that's out of comfort is extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, I had a couple of questions teed up for you, and you've answered them in a lot of ways. So, I'll ask you this because, observation and looking at other people and learning from their experiences and instituting that in your own authentic ways is exactly how you've developed to be who you are today. And that's written in your journals, right? That's what I heard loud and clear here. And so there is no shortcut to that. You took real life, you didn't read a book and subscribe to, somebody's theory. All of what you're talking about here today are things that I hear that's PJ. That is PJ. That's who he is. That's the life he's lived. And that is who he has. That's who he is today, that I knew from the coaching I get from you and from your programs and so forth. And it all makes a lot of sense. Talk to me about inspiration. Is that something, and if you notice my questions or the way I ask a question is changing now, because you've made me rethink just, not just our interview today, but as I'm reading your books, are we even asking the right questions? Just rethinking thought in itself is a whole mind shift. And it's really special because it is not something that I've ever been exposed to personally. And I have read a lot of books. I do observe in a lot of ways. And as we're talking, I know it's not enough. And I know I have a lot of work ahead of me, and a lot of folks listening to this are going to resonate with that as well. But let's talk about inspiration. Is that something, does that exist for you?
So yes, I mean, you get inspired when your senses get triggered. So you get, like, for example, you get inspired when you eat a better steak than the steak you had before.
Sure.
You get inspired when you watch a movie that's significantly better than the movie you watched before. Right. So what inspiration does, inspiration is a tool that triggers something much more important called aspiration. The state of aspiration is the state of believing of what's possible at a higher stage of the one you're in.
Yep.
It's not just wanting more, it's to believe there is more. And when you get inspired, you trigger basically that ladder to know that something exists that you didn't think existed.
Right.
Like you drive a car, like some crazy car that you've never even thought that was possible.
Yep.
It gives you a feeling that you never thought existed. Like, you're inspired to a degree where, like, this, I need this in my life.
Absolutely.
Now it triggers that aspiration to want to create a new reality for yourself that basically includes this in your life.
Yep.
Like I always say, you can never go back. That's the beauty of aspiration. It's the greatest tool to progress because it never allows you to go backwards. Like, ask any Ferrari owner if he can ever drive a Honda again.
Of course.
And the answer is like, what the fuck would I do that for? Like there's no way. I'm going to work my ass. I'm never going to go back to that.
Right.
And it's not because here's the way people don't understand cars or watches or things like that. They look at them and they go, oh, it's vain. It's stupid. You're spending money. No, it's not. It's actually the greatest gift you can give yourself is to give yourself the gift of someone else's passion. Like, imagine this. How much passion went into making a Honda Civic? Fucking zero. What was the point of it? They were looking at it and they were like, which consumer will buy this piece of shit to basically go to their miserable fucking life from point A to point B every fucking day and care about having a CD player with some fucking scratchy leather ass seats with a heater on it? Like, that's fucking cool. Yeah. What do these things do? They breed comfort and disappointment on a daily basis. Yeah. What does driving to your same commute, maybe 3 miles, 10 miles from home, not even a long distance. You're not going on a racetrack.
Yep.
How will that change when you're sitting in the cockpit of the car that basically won the Le Mans 5 years ago, or shattered the records, or the trim is built from the finest of leather that gives you a feeling and a sense of importance? Like, what happens is, what people don't realize about cars, and what people don't realize about luxury and craftsmanship and quality, is that it comes from a place of aspiration, someone else's aspiration.
Yes.
Someone didn't create that shit to be like, get your ass from point A to point B faster because you have a Ferrari.
Right.
You can buy a Mustang that's just as fast as a Ferrari. You can buy some crazy Cobra and you're like, 50 grand, it's just as fast.
Right.
But the experience of getting there changes.
Yep.
And one of the things that people realize with the more money is money buys experiences and opens doors to experiences.
Absolutely.
And that is the power. That is the power of aspiration, is that it is the whole goal is to experience better.
Right.
You know, and like people would say, what's the point of a $300 steak when you go to an Outback and have a $20 steak? Because you don't have the means to have a $300 steak.
Right.
So instead of wanting to experience that, you're more concerned about justifying why that experience doesn't exist in your life.
Exactly.
And that's why comfort is a disease and aspiration is the tool that basically breaks you out of that. So when you're inspired, you aspire to create, right? And when you aspire to create, you create a life that you actually are proud to enjoy experiencing. And that's the difference. People are always worried about the journey, or they're saying it's about the results. It's not. It's about the experience you choose. The most conscious of humans are the ones that can choose the experiences they wake up to every day.
Yeah.
And they can craft and shift these experiences every moment. Like if today's experience really bothers me, I can shift it. I can change it. I can change my whole schedule and say, I don't care. I don't want to talk to you today. Like, that's not the experience I want to have. Right. But when you're poor, you can't do that, right? Because you're at the boundary of other people. Yes. Like someone like Elon Musk creates an experience for you to come work at a shitty warehouse. Right. So you go in and you do your job and you're like, okay, that's the experience he's created for you. And you're forced to live it because you can't create your own. And the problem is that man was always meant to experience and was always meant to evolve. And the only way we evolve is by having greater experiences. So you see, it's the counter fucking thing that keeps you into this box your whole life.
Yeah.
Because you're so focused on what's happening in the box and trying to get out of the box and just being comfortable in the box, instead of saying to yourself, like, how do I create a box that I can reimagine every day, that I can enter in every day?
Absolutely.
And that I can exist in. And most people don't want to do that. You know why? Because it takes a lot of work. I had to work 20 years to build my own box.
Right.
And I had to keep that intent for 20 years in the same direction.
Yep.
There are many times where I could have used my tools and my powers to manipulate the world to get exactly what I want and make my experience better.
Sure.
But one of the things we choose as we evolve as a human is the intent of which, and the other experiences that our boxes create for others, and how do they change as their boxes come into ours, as our circles start to touch each other and we become basically part of a larger ecosystem.
Yep.
How do our experiences alter other people's experiences positively or negatively, and makes their experience better as a result?
Yeah.
That is the only connection we have to other humans. So every idiot out there that's saying we were born to help others, and if you don't help others, they're fucking morons.
Yep.
No one was born to help anybody. Like what you are born for is your own personal experience and evolution into your system.
Absolutely.
Now the question becomes, how much of that do you care about other people's experience? But the problem is, most poor people will say, well, you ought to help others when you get rich, because they're not rich.
Right.
Like, and what I'm saying is, they haven't crafted their own experience. So they go, whatever you do, make it a good experience for me, because you already have a great experience. You already have all this stuff. So make my experience better. Exactly. They're thieves again. You know, they need to be wiped off your life, because that's the herd. That's the danger of civilization, is to believe in the stupidity of someone who has never created an experience for themselves.
Yep.
And that somehow their words, their senses should have an impact on your experience of life.
Yep.
Despite there's nowhere in their life impacting yours in a better way, but yet wanting your experience to impact theirs in a better way.
Of course.
Yeah. But that's the danger of civilization, because we live in a civilization that encourages that.
Yep. Yeah, and promotes that and enables that entirely.
Correct.
These are just such profound, these are just such profound thought processes and really transformational mindsets. And so I personally has been affected by your work positively. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing it. I really appreciate it. I know I'm one of thousands and thousands that has also been impacted by that. So on behalf of that entire community and the ones that are in front of you that you are yet to impact, I'm sure they'll also express gratitude as well. PJ, I want to ask you about the, if there were, I'm sure there were many, but was there a switch that was flipped at some point in your life that made you realize that, okay, this is where I need to go? And I know, even you talk about your journals being different stages in your life. So I know there were triggers there, but is there one, from early on that kind of, you knew early on I was meant for to impact other people's lives positively? Was there anything like that?
No, that's a choice. That's not something, that's never been my purpose. My purpose was to teach. And I think that's different. Teaching doesn't always result in positive impact.
Yep.
To teach is to share. Again, definitions matter. To go into and saying teachers are good people.
Sure.
Well, that's because as a society, we've accepted that the retarded teaches kindergarten is a good teacher. That's a positive thing to have a teacher in kindergarten. How many teachers we know are complete assholes?
Right.
How many teachers we know don't really give a fuck about teaching anything of value or advancing someone's journey, right?
Absolutely.
And they're like, I have to come to this work and I hate these fucking kids and they're annoying. I just told them to read this fucking book. I don't want to do it, right?
Right.
So we have identified. That's why we get so angry when we hear a teacher, fuck the students, or we get angry when we hear that a teacher is not treating students properly, right? Because we have this falsified sense of attention in our head as to what our expectations are of those that teach. And that's not always true. I mean, teachers can teach very bad things too, right? Like, meaning teach in their reality, they may not be bad, but they could be for the, negative impact of others, right?
Absolutely.
So those things are there too. So I think we shouldn't just automatically assume that. But I think one of the things that is important in what you're talking about, which is when it's clicked for me that it was my purpose, is that purpose in itself, again, a defined word that often is looked at as a divine intervention of what you were born to do, what you were meant to do.
Right.
And I think that in itself is a problem too. Purpose is simply your choice of what your acceptance of your existence is in this point in space and time.
Yeah.
Meaning, when I was a banker, I chose to make banking my purpose.
Agreed.
Therefore, I improved as a banker.
Yes.
That opened hundreds of doors. Then when I no longer wanted to commit to that trade, I chose to make finance my purpose. And I evolved to that next stage.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is, and while on the surface, I could say, well, all of these were different purposes. No, because the common denominator was that in each of these acceptance of what I chose to do during that time and space in my life, it was still the one connector to all was that as a finance guy, as a banker, I was still a great teacher. And so paying attention to what made me progress through these stages was what enabled me to say that maybe I have a natural talent for teaching. So therefore, I should explore that. That exploration, paying attention and my senses coming together, focusing on that exploration, led me to accepting that my life purpose and the one I choose to commit to for the next 100 years, not 5 anymore, not 6, not with a change of heart and degree,
right,
is that of teaching. Now, here's where I understand that even teaching can get boring, can get stale and comfortable.
Right.
So I have to reinvent how and what I teach every single day. That's why you have Exotic Car Hacks, Watch Trading Academy, which I committed myself no longer to teaching just anything, but rather the one choice I had was to teach from experience. And so my commitment was to teach my experiences.
Got it. Okay.
That's why you may say, well, I've known you for your cars, your watches. This is very deep and different.
Right.
Right? Because you weren't ready to be taught this part until you picked up that book.
Yeah.
Get it? Like what I'm saying is, and what happens, what I've always said, that's why I'm sorry. If you are part of my communities, you'll notice I'm very rude, direct to people. Like people are like, oh, I'm going to buy this, really cool Mercedes. I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? Who told you to do that? This doesn't even say anything in the course. Why are you fucking here? Yeah. And people are like, well, that's rude. I paid for your program. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Get a refund, get out. And they're like, well, what an asshole. Like, that's not what I want. Because this is the thing with teachers. People, again, have an expectation, right? And the thing is, I'm like, I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm not a marketer. I don't give a fuck if you paid for a
Right.
product or not.
Right.
If you don't want to learn from the teacher, get the fuck out of my classroom.
Yep.
It's that simple. Like it's not for everybody.
Absolutely.
When you go back to your high school days, you didn't love every one of your teachers.
Right.
And the ones you loved the most weren't the ones that always taught you the most. You know, you're like, yeah, I love that lady. She was so sweet. I loved her class.
Yeah.
But you're like, my chemistry teacher taught me a lot of shit. You know, I know every composition of everything. You're like, that guy was a dick though, but like, fucking, I learned everything.
You learned,
you
exactly.
know, and I aspired to become a doctor now as a result of that, right? So the question is, you don't have to be loved to teach, and you don't have to be nice to teach.
Right.
You can stick to the principle of what you teach, and the student will find the teacher.
Yep.
And then the question becomes, can the student survive the teacher? And can the teacher, is the teacher's intent truly to teach what it is? Or is their intent to do something else, manipulate or create something else?
Right.
So I know my personal intent. That's why I take my students very seriously. When they say something not aligned to the teaching,
Yep.
I wonder why they exist in my community, right? Because I then just go, why are you here?
Right.
Like many people come to my exotic car hacks community with the intent to improve their lifestyle, the cars, everything else.
Right.
And some of them I discover are using these tools to extort others by pretending to be rich, because I teach people how to basically buy 10 times a better car,
Right.
like than what they can afford, right? Without losing any money. And someone goes, well, now I'm going to start a course on how to be a successful person because I bought this Lamborghini. So I find that I kick them out of my course and they go, well, what the fuck?
Right.
And I'm like, listen, I understand sometimes students like it's like the war, like you're training a soldier. At some point, someone in the CIA has to say that guy's intent is like flawed. You know, like it's not just could turn against us, but like he's pulling the trigger really easily. You know, like and that should scare us.
Yeah.
And there is that guy in that room that has zero self-awareness that goes, that's a very good soldier and killer.
Yeah.
And someone else goes, we're not training killers. You know, we're using this for change, and I don't think this is the change we're gonna get out of this.
Right.
You know, and like
The
maybe I
intent's
need
totally
to.
different.
Maybe I need to stop, you know, like halfway through, maybe I need to realize I'm wrong and I'm training the wrong people, right?
Yeah.
And you stop. That's what should happen, right? But then there's always that ego that comes in. Well, the last guys couldn't shoot shit. This guy's shooting perfect.
Right.
I'm just going to overlook this, right? but look at the recipe for disaster that creates,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
You see what I mean? Like 50 years later, now you got a plane in a building, you know, and you got 5,000 dead people. I mean, but that's the truth. People aren't talking about that.
No, you're right. You're right.
But those are the things, those are the byproducts of people who didn't pay attention. People who said, it's more important for me to gain what I want now than look at the impact of what I'm doing now in the next 500 years. No different than climate, politics, and everything else.
Yep.
Right? We'll look at politics the same way. Like, oh, this is good for taxes now. But what does it mean for 20 years from now?
Absolutely.
Oh, but I want to be alive 20 years from now. Who gives a shit? No, like that's the way right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's fantastic stuff, man. I love it. So PJ, I know we're coming up on the hour, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I do want to, if we can probably end with this particular item, you know, you talk about, you know, your latest book, The Gate of Choice, being your last piece of work, your last piece of literary work. You know, are you able to share a little bit about that? Because I got to tell you, personally speaking, and I'm not saying this for the podcast. I'm saying this because I truly believe this. This is impressive work. Mm-hmm. And I'll read this several times, and I'll read it next year, and it'll mean something different, and I'll gain a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But as you know, you've also, I'll use the word matured, but you know, you've evolved, right?
Right. That was the point, right? Like that's why.
And
if you read my work, it's the same thing. You'll see from my first book to now, there's a lot of internal and external evolution, both as a writer, to also as, you know, a producer of content. Right. Thirdly, as a teacher. I think that's important, right? I'm getting better teaching. Yeah. Because I've done it longer, and I understand with more intent what I want to teach. Yep.
And so in one of, you know, I also am a member of your boot camp as well. And I noticed, you know, so I want you to confirm this for me, but I'm getting the sense that, you know, the next stage of, you know, your existence or your intents are to teach teachers and create teachers. Am I reading that right?
Very true.
I get a sense of that. Okay, awesome. Can you talk about that for a little bit? You want to?
You paid a lot of attention. Someone read between the lines a lot better than expected.
I mean, well, I'm following, I'm borrowing from a lot of the concepts and I mean, this last hour has just blown my mind, even after reading your stuff and working in your programs and having exposure to you. But I love it. I absolutely love it. I gravitate towards that stuff and I'm extremely attracted to it. And for you to just validate that makes me feel extremely happy. So, I mean,
Look, at some point, the only way we carry information forward, I mean, think about it this way. We as a civilization adopted religion, right? Which was a disease and basically destroyed modern world into what it is. Religion is built on two basic artifacts, which is the first one is the control of population. The second one is built on common belief, right? So if common belief so far has been adopted to be in a prison, well, we succeeded. Right. 90% plus of the population is in a prison.
Agreed.
Fucking great job. It doesn't matter what your religion is. Just
up.
By accepting it, you basically fucked us. Like congrats, we got here, right?
Yes.
I think the only way we can evolve past that is to start this process of using the same tools we had then to basically get mass belief into personalization, authenticity, individualization, and more importantly, evolution. I think in the path we've taken, it's a dangerous path. I think it leads down a very, very dangerous road. Yep. Where coexistence becomes very impossible. We're starting to see a lot of signs of that. We're seeing signs of that in US politics, in global politics. We're seeing globalization break apart, right? And people basically being like, I don't agree with you and I don't want to do business with you. And this is stopping. And we're seeing this breakdown of advancement happen for the sake of personal gain.
Yes.
And it's becoming very, very common. There are two factors to human civilization that we can't change. And that's we coexist, that we like it or not.
Right.
And we use the same ecosystem, which is the same Earth. Some of us believe we need new planets. So they're going outside and they're like, fuck this, I'm out.
Yep.
Some of us are here and understand that this is the ecosystem. Yet half of us are trying to destroy it. The other half are trying to preserve it. And this disagreement and the continuity just creates no motion in any direction, right? Yeah. Nothing ever happens. Right. And this is not just in the United States, it's everywhere, right? And if unfortunately it starts happening in one direction versus another, well, it creates, what if that direction is flawed, right?
Yep.
What if we give up in it? Then it's irreversible, right? To a degree where it's not fixable.
Yep.
I think it's time. I think it's been time. And I think this book came at the right time, which time is an illusion, but it came at a moment where I think people were ready to start looking at how does that occur? Like, what do I have to do to be part of that direction? Because I see something fundamentally wrong.
Yep.
With civilization, like it doesn't even matter where you're from, what your color is, there's something wrong with the way man has adopted his purpose of evolution. Yep. Because he's forsaken his purpose of evolution, meaning like people have given up on that idea.
Yep.
And as a result of giving up, they've given up on the experience of being a human, which is the sole, even existence of your body. So there's so much that's been broken through the generations and decades and hundreds and thousands of years that I think we're at a pivotal point where it's no longer a country conversation, a religious conversation, a background conversation. It's a human conversation.
Yes.
And it's not about equality. It's not about justice. It's not about these things. It's about understanding the human experience. And I think that it's gotten to a place where there's too many humans to control that experience the way it's been controlled before. There's too much information to get people to just buy into what you're saying, and things are different, right? Times are different and we haven't evolved fast enough. Time has caught up to us, meaning like the ecosystem now functions faster than our ability to keep up with it, right? Yeah. So as a species, we're technically now overwhelmed by the ecosystems we live in. I mean, again, we are the victims of all of the incidents that happen, like massive fires. We're the victims of tornadoes. We're the victims of hurricanes. It's no longer the other way around where we're in front of it, right? where we are like, yeah, we understand the ecosystem, we're better than it, we're preserving it, functioning in it, and coexisting in it.
Yep.
And I think that I think it's time for these teachers to start showing up.
Yeah.
And to start making a shift in what they're teaching.
Yeah. The real
And
teachers, right?
Well, I mean, those that truly want to be, not those that are because it's a profession or they're paid to be. I think that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
You know, you hear lines like, what would you do the rest of your life if you weren't paid $1 to do it?
Right.
Those guys are out there.
Yeah.
And I think, and listen, it's hard to be a teacher because when you teach, you're met with a lot of ridicule and criticism.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first 5 years I was teaching, back in 2007, you know,
Yeah.
people said I was an idiot for thinking certain things or this and that. Nobody would read this, nobody would do that.
Right.
And it's fine. Listen, I nothing ever bothered me because I never allow other experiences to come in mine and flaw my experience of life. But a lot of people do, right? It's hard to be out there. It's hard to teach something. It's hard to even speak of something online and, you know, not get, oh, you're an idiot. You know, everything you
Every day.
hear, even smart conversation today is ridiculed and fought with stupid people that don't know anything, just wanting to have an opinion, right?
Yep.
And what happens is the only way we move forward past that is if enough people are talking about the same thing. And my goal with Gator Choice was to create a platform that enabled common direction that wasn't built upon race, religion, background, political belief, or anything else, but rather based upon the idea of being a human.
Yep.
And if you can accept that, which trust me when I say half the population can't even accept that shit because they think they live in on a spaceship. But if you can face that in the mirror, and you can face that there's something seriously wrong, and you can't come to terms with at least having a place to start, which is that book, then you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Yep. At some point, though, remember, there's more problems than there are solutions, and that tips over for all of us.
Yep.
So, you know, I think that it's just important to start going back to the basics of understanding what makes us humans, and to start having teachers start teaching that, which are really not talked about anymore. You know, we teach more about IT in colleges than we teach about the human experience.
Yep.
And I think that maybe it's time for that to change.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's PJ. Those just, you know, some extremely powerful concepts, extremely powerful thought process that you know, it's totally a mind shift. And even for, you know, the last hour that we've been talking, I've learned a lot, and I've read your books, and just
I'm glad. That's the point, right?
No, absolutely, but hearing you talk through it in your own language, absolutely just elevates those concepts. And I want to thank you for your work. Thank you for all that you've done. It is touching, I mean, you know this, it's touching lives. It's touching my life. It's touching my family's life. It's having impact in positive ways. And, you know, I really appreciate all that you've done. And as a direct result, I'm, you know, also pursuing a path of teaching as well. Right. And so when we talk about teaching teachers, I think that resonates with me, and in alignment with the things that I'm learning from people like yourself. And so thank you for that education. Thank you for that knowledge. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. This has been fantastic. I really, really deeply appreciate it. And I hope we can talk again soon. We can do this.
Absolutely.
We can expand on some more concepts. I love the topics, and there's a lot of things I want to explore a little bit more. But look forward to the opportunity again. You know, thank you for this opportunity, and keep doing what you're doing. You got a lot of supporters. I'm definitely one of those guys. And not that you need to hear that, but you know, I'm in your corner. I love your attitude. I love your style. I just love your candor and everything about it. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
I'm glad to hear. And again, you know, keep doing what you do, because that in itself inspires people and it connects people to these concepts, you know?
Right. Exactly. Yep. All right, PJ. Thanks so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, buddy. Thanks again. Okay. Have a great day.